Calix Boxing here, calixboxing.com, Calix Boxing 2.0 here on YouTube, and Calix Boxing 2 on Twitter. Just hit good milestone on Twitter, 1,000 followers there, and just hit a very good milestone here on YouTube, 5,000 subscribers, man. And I appreciate that. It's been a journey. It's been one of those things. A decade ago plus started this channel and was active for about that first year, and then took a long break since then and been active for about another year now. And I built this thing back up to where we got 5,000 subscribers. You're having daily content again, and expect for a daily flood of content. I got 2 new specials starting. One of them is going to be, and they focus on boxing history. One of them is going to be dedicated to lower weight fighters. And episode 1 of that is going to drop tonight or tomorrow morning. It's going to be volume 1 of Lower Weight Class Kings. And also you're going to have a segment focused on videos focused on this channel on great fights of the 21st century so far, the first 22 years of this century. We're going to focus on the great fights of the 21st century so far. So you got 2 new segments, two new documentary type segments on this channel that you're going to see. So make sure to visit the channel on a daily basis and check out these videos that I've been dropping. Today, we were going to focus on just recapping this past weekend, my overall thoughts, my overall conclusion on this past weekend, and how it takes us forward with these fighters. And then we're going to start focusing on the bloodbath that will be this weekend, but Beterbiev versus Joe Smith Jr., a fight that when they announced it, man, I circled it. I said, this is a fight that we're going to have to, like, this is a fight that I invited a couple casuals over to my house this Saturday coming up to watch this fight. I said, this is a fight that y'all got to watch. This is a fight that y'all got to watch. If you want to just see two dudes just want to beat each other up, bloodbath, you're going to get it with Beterbiev or versus Joe Smith Jr. And I think it's a sneaky good fight too, because I think Joe Smith Jr. is undervalued at the price line Vegas has him at right now. Remember, we look at value, and we looked at value coming into this past weekend. I'll touch on that again. That's right, Houston Oilers in the building. I like the throwback caps, and I'm a cap collector, so I like that Houston Oilers cap, one of my favorites. And but also hit that alert button as you subscribe as well. Getting a lot of subscribers, but make sure you hit that alert button, because YouTube is not going to, just because you subscribe, YouTube is not going to send you the videos. You got to hit that alert button as well. So I appreciate everybody that's been throwing the new support this way, and me rebuilding this channel, rebuilding and revamping this channel. But as far as the fights this past weekend, what did we say coming up? We looked at the lines. We looked at where the value is. And first, the heavyweight fight was the heavyweight fight. Don King stuck these guys in a gymnasium in South Florida. Dubois versus Trevor Bryan. Mismatch. And we knew it was a mismatch. That's why Vegas priced this fight at 3.5 rounds. They knew that Dubois was going to get rid of Bryant early in this fight. But what always makes me wonder about boxing is, and if these fighters look at the lines going in, is I saw Dubois. It looked like he was carrying Bryant a little bit to me. And then 20, 30 seconds after the line goes over, he decides to finally get rid of Bryant. So I think he carried Bryant a little bit, and then the over hit, which I was going to play the under. I stayed away, but I was going to play the under, and he went over. But Dubois got the stoppage. It was a Don King pay-per-view in 2021 is what you saw. Not much to talk about, and I don't expect much from either fighter going forward. It is what it is with that. But Berlanga, let's start with Berlanga, because Berlanga was a guy for years. They had been building up as this knockout artist, this monster, this new Puerto Rican kingpin who was going to be a big draw in New York, was going to knock guys out. And they put him in there with, Uber drivers for years. racked up 14, 15 straight KOs against guys who were completely outmatched. Now, on top of that, some of these stoppages were stopped a little bit early. So you can tell they were trying to pad that record and trying to turn this guy into this KO artist. Dirty, unskilled hype job. And that's the thing with Berlanga. It's like, so they build him up, and then they reach this point where you got to start to step the guy up incrementally, right? That's what they have to do with guys. So they start to step him up incrementally, and in the process, he stops getting KOs. So you say, okay, wait a second here. What's going on here? So he doesn't get a KO for 3 straight fights, doesn't look good in these fights. So you say, okay, maybe let's see if he can snap out of this. So we come into the fight this weekend against Romer Alexis Angulo, and I said coming in, Angulo is undervalued at that price because Angulo, Colombian fighter, he's tough, he's got a good chin, went 10 rounds with Benavidez, an offensive output guy, went 12 rounds with Zerto, so the guy has a chin. On top of that, he can land punches to keep you honest. And it was a weird, people sort of questioned me on this. I bet the over. I wrote the article and told people there's value in the over. And people said, wait a second, 2 punchers going against each other. Why would you bet the over in this fight? It's because Berlanga always had trouble setting up shots. And on top of that, a 38-year-old, slow and plotting Romer Alexis Angulo was going to have trouble setting up shots as well. And you saw that in this fight. It was a slow fight. Berlanga looked disinterested for most of the fight. He kept looking into the stands. He's just a guy who doesn't have it upstairs on top of many other things. And Angulo as well, being slow and plotting, wasn't able to land big combination punches against Berlanga. He would land one shot at a time, and then it became a close fight, which was expected. I expected it to be a close fight. But to be honest, I don't know how close it was. I don't know if it was a robbery or debatable, because I stopped scoring this thing 3 rounds in because I was so disinterested in the fight. I was struggling to stay up and watch it. That's how boring Berlanga is. And they built him up to be this exciting, false advertisement. They built him up to be this exciting KO artist who was going to draw as a Puerto Rican fighter in New York. And they've reached a tough point, a rock and a hard place point with Berlanga now, because where do you go? Where do you go? Do you continue to put him in there with guys at the level of Angulo, who he should beat by decision just by showing up, eking out victories? Will his fan base get disinterested in that and tune out? So that's the risk you run there. The other risk you run is you step them up. Cash out time. You step him up against top 10 opponents, and we know what happens then. He either gets starched, stretched out, or he gets outboxed, outclassed for 10 rounds. One of the two. That's what's going to happen. So there's risk both ways. It's the opposite of what you have if you have a guy who is that dude. If you have a guy who is that dude, let's throw out Shakur Stevenson. It doesn't matter what they do with Shakur. Shakur Stevenson can fight anybody. And there's not much risk because the guy is so talented. So they can milk it. They can step him up. They can do many different ways, go many different avenues with a guy like that. If a guy is truly talented, you're not scared of stepping him up. They know they cannot step Berlanga up. They know it. They know it. And we all know it. We all know that they know it. So it reaches a point like, where do they go? That's what's interesting to me. I don't think they're going to step him up. I don't think they're going to step him up. People keep telling me, oh, it's cash out time. They're going to cash him out. They're going to move him up. I think they're going to try to get creative with him. Maybe find a Mexican fighter who is coming up a weight, who doesn't have much punching power or boxing ability. Maybe he's well past his prime, and play the Puerto Rico versus Mexico angle in New York. I think they're going to go that route instead of moving him up and cashing him out. I think they feel it's too early to cash this guy out. Berlanga needs to quit boxing and would go be a barber, because it looks like he had a nice fade. He had a nice, sharp fade. What's up, Santeo Media in the building? Berlanga, the new Tyson. The only difference there is, You have guys who were punchers who they were beating legitimate guys, winning legitimate titles before they were found out. Berlanga hasn't won anything. I mean, he's got a trinket around his shoulder that doesn't mean anything. Nobody knows what that trinket is. He hasn't beat anybody. This is complete hype job territory. He hasn't done any. He simply hasn't done anything, and you're already seeing the flaws, and he hasn't done anything yet, and you're already seeing the flaws. So that's what I'm saying. You can't go anywhere with this guy right now. You can't go. You can't go anywhere. What a far cry this was from Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend. Remember Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend when Cotto and look, a lot of people focus on Felix Trinidad. I love Tito Trinidad. Better Puerto Rican fighter overall than Miguel Cotto, admittedly. But Cotto is the one who made Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend a thing in boxing. He was the one who did it. It was Miguel Angel Cotto who did that. All right, so what a far cry this was from the days when Cotto was entertaining in Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend, when the Madison Square Garden was sold out or close to it. You had entertaining fights. You had meaningful fights. And you saw Cotto's progression year after year. The fights kept getting bigger and more meaningful, bigger, more meaningful each year. You saw the growth of Cotto every Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend in boxing. What a far cry we are from that to where Berlanga is the headliner. And he's fighting in the small ballroom at Madison Square Garden. And people are falling asleep. Cotto didn't even stay for the main event. He left. They saved him a seat front row. He left. Fat Joe probably left. Terror Squad's probably not even claiming him anymore. Shout out my guy Remy. Calix, my dude. Greetings. Appreciate that, man. Always appreciate the support. Remy in the building. But what a far cry it is. Puerto Rican boxing is just not where it was. And it needs to get back, because when you have that Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry, it just livens things up, right? That's boxing. It livens things up. When Puerto Rico has their great star, Mexico has their great star, and Mexico has multiple stars right now. Puerto Rico does not have theirs. Xander Zayas is moving up. Unfortunately, he got ill, was not on his card, but I fully expect Xander Zayas to be the guy who headlines Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend in New York next year. I fully expect him to be the guy going forward, because he looks like the guy who could be the real deal. He has more layers to his game than just knocking guys out. He can box. He's more marketable than a Berlanga. Looks like a marketable guy. Berlanga just doesn't have anything. Like there's nothing there. They built him up to be something. It was false advertisement. They built him up to be something that, as a product, that he's not. It's like you buy this great product, you open up the package, and it's a dud. That's Berlanga. Unfortunately, it's Berlanga. And I don't really see anything that he can improve on to be better. He's just a straight up and down fighter. Doesn't throw any feints. There's no layers to his game. His jab isn't great. He doesn't set up punches well. He's not a great defensive fighter. There's nothing that this guy's great at. In fact, I don't even think there's anything he's really good at. His power punching is not really good, because if it was, he would have knocked out one of his last 4 opponents since he stepped up. So there's nothing that the guy's great at. I don't even think there's anything he's really good at. And if he was 20 fights in as a super middleweight, he'd be in the top 10 right now, because super middleweight's not a deep division. Super middleweight's a division in which you have a 7-0 fighter right now in the top 5 or right outside of it in Dave Morrell Jr. At the bottom of it, you got like guys like, and no offense to them, but Zach Parker, John Ryder, Danny Jacobs, the corpse of him is still in the top 10. The bottom level. The bottom level is just fillers in there right now. You don't have a deep division at 168. So what I'm saying is, if this guy was as talented as they were building him up to be, he'd be in the top 10 already 20 fights in. And he wouldn't have been fighting Romer Alexis Angulo in his 20th fight. He would have been fighting somebody higher. So how do your handlers handle you? How do fighters in and around your weight class behave, react when your name is brought up. Nobody fears him, and his handlers are handling him very softly right now. So we have to assume that Berlanga just isn't the fighter they're making him out to be. Berlanga is no Puerto Rican boxing star. That this time next year, Xander Zayas will be headlining MSG, not Berlanga. And we are on the same page right there, I believe. Time to cash Berlanga out. He has reached his ceiling. I believe he's reached the ceiling as well. I don't know if they're going to cash him out, though. I think they're going to try to get creative with him and try to buy time. Maybe, just maybe, they're thinking each fight with the new trainer, he'll get better, maybe technically. I don't think he's there. I think he's sort of a space cadet up top. I see him disinterested when the pace in the fight breaks. He doesn't know how to control the pace. He doesn't know how to step on the gas. He doesn't seem to have a killer instinct. He doesn't seem to follow instruction in the corner. He seems to be more worried about what's going on outside of the ring than inside of the ring. I think there are a lot of red flags with Berlanga. I think maybe the expectations are really getting to Berlanga. That too. I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but it all comes into play when you have a guy who is falsely promoted, the package on the outside of the box is not what's inside the box. We've all had those experiences. We order something on Amazon. We expect to get one thing. We open up the package and something very much different is on the inside. It's false advertisement here with Berlanga is what we got. He said improved it. He's a monster. And by the way, like, not even Berlanga's teeth did damage in this fight. He legitimately bit or tried to open his mouth and bite Alexis Angulo's neck in this fight, which should have been a DQ if we're being honest, or at least a harsh warning with multiple points taken away, and nothing. I'm interested to see what the New York State Athletic Commission does with this, because it's right there on video. We all saw it, but not even his teeth could do damage in this fight. Much like his punches, his teeth can't even do damage. Maybe he's got veneers. I don't know. Or disqualification for biting. That's right. What was worse, Tyson Fury licking Wilder or Berlanga? I think it's nastier to lick a sweaty dude, obviously, but it's also nasty to bite a sweaty dude. I don't have experience in either, but as far as boxing goes, it's worse to try to bite a guy, obviously, because there should be some sort of suspension for that. You lick a dude, everybody just goes, that's nasty. Why would you lick a dude? Why would you lick it? You get nothing out of licking a dude. That's weird. He's sweaty. There's no competitive advantage to that. At least for biting a dude, you say maybe there's a competitive advantage to that if you get away with it. But with cameras everywhere, why would dudes think that they can get away with biting a dude's neck? So either way, man, either way, that's bad. If they cash him out now, they won't make too much money. Yeah, the thing with Berlanga too is look at Jaime Munguia, who we'll talk about in a minute. I'm on record. Jaime Munguia could lose 4, 5, 6 fights, but his fan base will still be there because he's an exciting, entertaining fighter. It's either going to go bad or it's going to go good. You saw it with Jimmy Kelly in that fight. For the first 3 or 4 rounds, it was bad. Then it went good. But if he loses, his fan base will still show up. He's got a nice built-in fan base, as does Berlanga. But Berlanga's fan base is not going to stick around if he's putting on performances like this. Munguia shows up. No matter what you think about his opposition so far, he's showing up. He's giving the fans what they came to see. It's not false advertisement. They expected to see an entertaining fighter. They're getting an entertaining fighter. With Berlanga, he's being promoted as this entertaining crossover star. And ladies and gentlemen, are showing up into the building and seeing a dude who's stinking it up against inferior opposition for 10 rounds. This guy's not even in 12-round fights yet, 20 fights in. And he's throwing, 30 to 40 punches per round, barely eking by rounds against inferior opposition. That's not an exciting fighter. So guys aren't even getting what they're showing up, paying good money to see with Berlanga. So that's tough. Top Rank does a lot of good marketing with certain boxers and misses the marks with others. It's part of the sport. Yep, it is. It's part of the sport. Fat Joe said Berlanga is improving. At what? Not boxing. He's not improving. He's not improving in fighting. What's he improving in? Penmanship? Or Xander Zaya seems and looks legit. Xander got to save the Puerto Rican top spot with TR, and I think he will. Munguia versus Berlanga. That's not. They do some sort of cross promotion thing and put it in New York. That's not a bad fight. It's not a bad fight. It's a fight Munguia would win, but it's not a bad look for both fighters. If they're looking to keep Munguia with maybe a smaller, shorter ceiling than we thought, get creative with him. They get creative with Berlanga. It's a big fight. Yeah, that might work. Berlanga versus Jacobs is next. I'd like to see that fight in New York. I think Jacobs wins it. I think Jacobs wins it easy. Yeah. Vargas, that was ugly. That was ugly. Should have been stopped earlier. The corner should have got in there earlier. That was ugly all the way around. And what a tough fall from grace that has been the past couple fights. Berlanga crash landed after he started facing D-class opponents. That's right. I don't even think he's in C+ territory yet. C+ B-. I think he's still like C- territory right now. Let's see what we got. Shout out Team Batman Boxing, my guy over there on Twitter and over here on YouTube, doing great work. Berlanga is trash. At least Munguia has heart. I agree. And in Munguia, you know you're going to get entertainment value. You know you're going to get a guy who's going to bring it. Berlanga trying to headbutt at the end. That was another thing, like trying to headbutt after the fight's over because he knew he put on a trash performance. Berlanga seems like a coward, in all honesty. Boxing career, Romero versus Berlanga. Yeah, Chauncey interesting. Berlanga wanted no part of a slugfest with a guy who's super slow and very hittable. Safe to say Berlanga gets beat. Many guys at 168 and plenty can move up from 160 and beat him. I agree. And I don't see a guy right now. And I was just talking about the top 10 being a lot of fillers, the bottom level of the top 10 at 168 being fillers of spots. I don't see him beating any of those guys. Not only that, I think he would get knocked out or outclassed by everyone in the bottom level of the top 10 right now. I don't see him fitting in. I don't think he fits in at all. Yildirim versus Berlanga, I think that's a tough fight. I think he would lose. Quite honest, I think he would lose. If any boxer hired Bruno Mars' movement coach, he'd be champion. Maybe that's what he needs to do. I don't know. I think Munguia would give Berlanga a beating. I think so too. Congrats on the 5K. Appreciate that. Just hit 5K subs. Appreciate that. When is Caleb Plant fighting again? I don't know. It's just these PBC guys at 168. I think Al Haim is trying to buy time. I think he's trying to buy time. I think he knows Canelo's not going to be available again until September 2023. Because Canelo has said he's going to stick to the plan for 2022, and then he wants to fight Dimitri Bivol in a rematch in May 2023. So at the very earliest, that brings Canelo back to the table in September 2023. So we're over a year removed. We're over a year from that. So Al Haymon has to buy time in the process to bring all these chips to the table in order to offer Canelo a multi-fight deal with PBC. So he's got to have, it sounds like he's going to sign Boo Boo Andre. He's going to have 160, soon to be 168 Charlo to bring to the table. He's got Morrell Jr. at 168. And of course, the big chip, David Benavidez as well. He wants to have all these chips to bring to the table. So you could say Caleb Plant is expendable because he already fought Canelo. But do you put these guys in the ring with a Caleb Plant, who is a legit top 5 guy in the weight class? Do you risk that, knowing that if Caleb Plant were to upset the apple cart and beat one of these guys, then that takes one of your chips off the table when it comes to a possible Canelo fight? That's what the landscape's looking at when we talk about 160 to 168 PBC fighters, unfortunately. So I don't know when Caleb Plant's going to fight. but I don't expect him to be in a big fight with any of those top guys that we mentioned in the PBC. And we know PBC likes to keep their money in house. So I just think Caleb Plant's going to come back maybe sometime in the fall, and it's going to be inferior opposition and then rinse and repeat, to be quite honest. Another fight I wanted to talk about before I get into Kyoguchi and finish it off with that, because Kyoguchi just impressed the hell out of me over the weekend. And what a fight that was with Bermudez. But before I get into that, Jaime Munguia versus Jimmy Kelly. When this fight was announced, we all shook our head and said, oh, it was supposed to be Munguia versus Jamal Charlo. And depending on who you talk to, some say it's Munguia's fault. Golden Boy wanted the zone involved. Some say it was Jamal Charlo's fault. Politics. But the fight didn't happen. And we got Munguia, unfortunately, against Jimmy Kelly. So you say, at least they're keeping this guy active. At least he's in fights where we have, he can give us highlight reel KOs. He's fighting every 3 or 4 months. So that's good. They're keeping him active. That's more than we can say about some other fighters in and around the division. However, it's Jimmy Kelly, a guy who's naturally smaller, a guy like Munguia should just overwhelm a Jimmy Kelly. But what happened instead? Jimmy Kelly gave us a good 3-4 rounds where he showed some flaws in Munguia's game, out jabbing him, lateral movement, athletic ability, and just outboxing him and winning some rounds against Munguia in this fight. Shout out Shoeshine Boxing. I hate the term immoral Munguia. I mean, I hate the term exposed because everyone overuses it. In this case, Berlanga has been exposed. He's got nothing after the first round. And I completely agree with this. We use the term exposed too much. Every time a fighter loses a fight or loses several rounds, and that's why I'm not saying Munguia is exposed. I see people out there saying that. We don't say that. But when it comes to Berlanga, yes, we're there. We're at that point. Exposed. Completely exposed. I completely agree with that level-headed comment there. I agree Janabek from within top rank could knock out Berlanga by moving up. Yeah, Janabek would send he'd send Berlanga to hell. I don't care if he's moving up a weight. Yeah, he would send him to hell. After Canelo beat Callum Smith, Berlanga tweeted he would have stopped Smith in 6 rounds and go the distance with 4 average guys. Callum Smith would leave Berlanga twitching on the ground. Agreed. I think Benavidez versus Canelo. I like Canelo versus Benavidez. I do too. And not only did he go the distance, but he looked poor ever since a fight of his went past the first round. Jimmy Kelly was game, but Munguia was also going to end him. Yes. And that's what I was going to get to. Jimmy Kelly had his moment. So you look at the first 3-4 rounds and you say, I wonder what would happen if Munguia did fight a Jamal Charlo. I wonder what would happen if he fought a guy, even a 40-year-old Gennady Golovkin, other guys at the top of the weight, a Janabek, guys at the top of the weight, and even guys at the lower end of the weight who have boxing ability. So when you watch Munguia fight, you're like, the first 3 or 4 rounds, you're like, I could easily see a guy outboxing him for much of a fight. Here's the thing when it comes to Munguia, though. As Batman Boxing just said, there's a point in the fight where a Munguia who constantly is throwing those heat seeker missiles, who's constantly fighting on the front foot, who's constantly digging into your body, who's changing levels, going back upstairs, who's going to find your chin at some point. There's going to be a point in the fight when he lands something, when he applies so much pressure that maybe you wear down. So that's what makes Munguia interesting to me and intriguing is no matter who you look at, bottom to top, 1 through 10 at middleweight, you look at those fights and you're like, I could see that going either way. I could see that guy outclassing Munguia for most of the fight, but I can also see Munguia's pressure being too much for that guy and Munguia knocking him out. Munguia is one of the most intriguing fighters in the sport for me because 40 fights in, hasn't fought top-level competition yet, but the eye test shows us that no matter what competition he fights, he's going to apply a lot of pressure and be in any of those fights because it's just the type of pressure that I don't think you're going to be able to just jab your way through for most of the for 12 rounds. So Munguia is tough. He's one of the most entertaining fighters in the sport. He's exciting, like I said, and he's one of those guys, as I continue to say, that I think they need to step him up now, sink or swim, because this guy loses 3 fights, 4 fights, 5 fights. Those folks who showed up at Anaheim to sell out that place on Saturday night against Jimmy Kelly are going to continue to show up for him because he's the guy who's going to lay it on the line, pour out his heart, fight after fight after fight. He's going to try to win, no matter if he's down 10 rounds to nothing or if he's up 6 rounds to 4. He's going to always look for ways to win a fight. He throws a lot of punches. Offensive-minded fighter, high output, pressure fighter. He's going to sell. He's going to sell. Somebody said that to me a couple weeks ago in the boxing world. I forget who it is on Twitter, but he told me entertaining fighters will always sell. It doesn't matter if they lose. As long as you can entertain, as long as you're fun, they're going to show up. They're going to show up. It was a ticket selling guy who told me that. I forget his name, but he told me these guys who fight like this, high pressure fighters, are going to sell. No matter how many times they lose, their fans, as long as they stay true to that, their fans are going to continue to show up. And Munguia is that type of guy. So I think it's sink or swim time. Step him up. I'd love to see the Jamal Charlo fight next. Jamal Charlo, I don't know how bad that injury is. Is it legitimate injury? He was supposed to fight this weekend. But why not just get straight to Munguia versus Jamal Charlo? Let's do it. Let's do it. But I saw obvious holes and flaws in Munguia's game in the first 3 or 4 rounds. But guess what? He won by 5th round stoppage. He's doing what he has to do. It's much like we say about Tank, right? Tank is selling. Tank will continue to sell no matter who he fights. Munguia is the same way. Munguia will continue to sell no matter who he fights. Fans are going to get what they showed up to get. They're going to get entertaining fights. They're going to get close fights. And that's an interesting comparison to make because at 135 and at 160, it's the same with Tank Davis and Munguia. We want both of them to step up, although Tank's been around a lot longer. And I think Tank's flaws are much more evident than Munguia's likely. It's debatable which ceiling is higher. I'd say most people would probably say Tank's ceiling is higher. I don't know if that's true or not. But they're both entertaining fighters who haven't stepped up yet, and their fan base will continue to show up no matter if they win or lose. I don't buy this thing that if Tank loses, people are going to stop showing up. I don't buy that. If he steps up and loses, I think people will continue to show up. And the same thing I say about Munguia. They're exciting fighters. I think you should package them as exciting fighters. And if they turn out to be great fighters, then even better. Even better. So Munguia, hittable guy, can be outboxed, can be outjabbed. Athletic fighters will likely give him issues for parts of fights, but then there will be those parts of fights where Munguia will give anybody issues due to that pressure and due to the fact that he's no slouch. He's no slouch. He can mix up his punches well. He can set his feet when a target is not moving. He can put combination punches together well. He's a devastating body puncher as well. He can change levels. This guy's not just a caveman. He's not a slouch. I like Munguia. I like him. I like what he gives us. I like what he gives the boxing world. And he did what he had to do on Saturday night, but he showed some obvious flaws that maybe you take his ceiling down a little bit for now. But we'll see. Definitely he's all action, and that's what I agree with. Munguia is a poor man, a rich man's David Lemieux. He'll go in and give you a war, much like David Lemieux. Yeah, and I love watching David Lemieux fight. Look what he did against Benavidez. Lemieux was outclassed, almost knocked out in the first round, but the guy at least kept punching, kept trying to win. He's got a lot of heart. You need guys like that in boxing. And you need guys like Munguia in boxing. No matter if he turns out to be a great fighter or a C-level fighter, I'm here. I'm here for it every time. And I just want to see them start to test those waters because we'll be forgiving with the Munguia. Jaime Munguia can either look great and win or lose, But I think even in his losses, he'll have moments where he looks great due to his style. And I think due to his style, he's great at what he's great at, but the things he's flawed at, it's evident. And I think because of that, and if you look at the landscape at 160, everybody has flaws at 160. There's not anybody close to perfect at 160 right now. And I think evidence of that is these guys are staying away from each other because they know they have flaws and their promoters are afraid to step them up. And I think Canelo has something to do with that because I think they're all trying to protect their O's or whatever to stay in a Canelo sweepstakes. So he sort of paralyzed their careers. But Munguia is one of those guys that's flawed at the middleweight division, but what he brings is an action fighter. He's a marketable fighter in the boxing world. He's got a nice built-in fan base of Mexican fans. He's got a lot going for him. Tank's pay-per-views have been entertaining, something Berlanga just can't seem to do anymore. I only like that at least he fights every 3 months. That's right. But he needs to step it up, as we all think now. I always appreciate his energy levels and the way he will just keep those combinations flowing. That's right. He's going to stay in your chest. And he's a better combination puncher than people think. There's more to his game than just following and cutting off the ring. He's not just a caveman. There's a science to what he does when he has a stationary target in front of him and when he can go to work. It's finding that target, setting it up that he has issues with. And he showed that against Jimmy Kelly in the first 3 or 4 rounds. And that's the flaw that he has. But name a fighter at middleweight that you feel like could outbox Munguia that way for 10, 11, 12 rounds. I think they all have evident flaws. Even at Janibek, like Janibek is more stationary. So you look at that and you're like, man, that would be a war. That would be a war. I wouldn't pick anybody against Janibek at middleweight right now. That's just me. But that would be a fun fight. That would be hellacious. Munguia will break Floyd's record with obvious cherry picks. Zerto might break that record too. I'll watch any Lemieux fight for sure. Did you guys see the Charlo and Sim? That's right. And as far as this right here, Jermell is the big brother. Jamal is little brother. You see Jamal continue to be Jamal. Hasn't fought in going on 13 months. Just pulled out of a fight due to injury. And look, injuries happen, but when you're inactive, injuries happen more. When you're not sharpening that tool, when you're not sharpening your skills. Jermell is about that business. Jermell is that dude. Like, he's number 5 on my top 12 pound for pound list on calixboxing.com. Go check it out. He's cleaned out his division. He took a tough road to get there. Had a loss and a draw on his way to get there, but still ended up getting there by fighting the top competition in his division. So I expected him to move up to 160 and possibly take a softer touch at 160, stepping up. But guess what he's doing instead? It looks like he's going to fight Tim Tszyu, stay at 154 and take on Tim Tszyu. So he's staying in his weight with an obvious target on his back for younger lions coming up, Tim Tszyu, Sebastian Fundora. He's staying there and he's saying, come on, I'm going to defend all my belts against these young lions. How could you not like Jermell Charlo at this point? Like, I don't get it. Like, people, it's okay to dislike. You can dislike fighters for whatever reason, but there's nothing wrong with what Jermell Charlo's doing with his career. Nothing. Like, this dude is everything that's right about boxing. His ceiling might not be super high. There may be more talented fighters than him. But he's showing up. Fight after fight after fight, he's showing up. He's cut from that, like, Carl Froch cloth to where he's going to fight the top guys in his division that are available to him. And he does it. And he beats them. He might have some hiccups on the way, but he ends up on top. And he ended up on the top of the division. And he could have said, you know what, I'm done here. I'm going to move up to 160. I'm going to take a easier fight on my way up, get acclimated to the division. And that'll give me a reason to stay away from the young lions right now. But with young lions coming up like Tim Tszyu, like Sebastian Fundora in the division, he's sticking around. He's going to defend all his belts. It's not an easy thing to do. With sanctioning fees, with the politics of boxing, it's not sustainable to stay in your division and defend all your belts. That's why you have a lot of undisputed champions who don't stay undisputed champions. Jermell Charlo's going to try it, looks like. Props to him. That dude's a warrior. Munguia throws much more than Lemieux, though, and has much more heart. I agree. What do you think about Jaime? Which I don't know who has more heart. That's a subjective thing. But yes, stylistically, I think he has more to his game than Lemieux. I think he's a better overall fighter than Lemieux, but we'll find out. I wouldn't mind going to watch a Munguia fight. Yep. Is it cap or did Charlo agree to terms? I read somewhere they're fighting next. Maybe that could be the reason Charlo's injury. No. This the other brother is the one with the injury, Jamal. Jamel is sticking around at 154, and it looks like they're going to fight Tim Tszyu. They're not going to. They're just going to do it. They're just going to fight. That's what it looks like to me. That's all the reports I read said they're going to do the fight at 154, that he's sticking around and fighting Tim Tszyu. That was the reports over the weekend. So shout out to Jamal. It's not going to go to purse bid. That's what I meant. This was going to time out or go to a purse bid, and it's not going to go to purse bid. Apparently, they've come to some sort of verbal agreement for that fight. What I saw your tweet on Jamal versus Tim Tszyu, Calix, I agree. He's the big brother and the Lion King. That's right. You have one lion hibernating, even though lions don't hibernate, but lions do sleep 21 hours per day. So Jamal is filling that. Jamal's in the lion's den. He's over there in the lion's den sleeping 21 hours a day while Jamel's out hunting. Jamel's all out hunting all the lions in his division, taking care, bringing back the food to the den, right? That's what Jamel's doing. Jamel's the big brother. He's the big lion. Jamal is the little lion. And that's what we got going on in the Charlo household. But Jamel is that dude, man. Like, I just don't understand why people would not. It's tough for me to process that, wrap my brain around why people would not like what Jamel is doing right now in the boxing world. And that's why I put him up to number 5. I think there are more talented fighters with higher ceiling in boxing than that are lower on my pound for pound list, obviously. But to me, it's about accomplishments. Becoming undisputed in the way he became undisputed, it was a tough road. Not all undisputeds are equal. He had one of the tougher undisputed runs, and he did it. It's a great achievement in the 4-belt era. And on top of that, it looks like he's going to stick around and defend that against, speaking of lions, a young lion coming up in Tim Tszyu. And maybe Tim Tszyu is overvalued. Maybe he's overhyped. But the thing is, Jermell Charlo is going to find out. He's going to find that out. It would be fun to be amongst the crowd of a Munguia fight. I agree. I'm not so sure that Charlo versus Tszyu happens. I heard Charlo is moving up to 160. Tim Tszyu versus Liam Smith for the vacant WBO. And maybe maybe something else happened since Saturday, but the reports I read on Saturday is that it's not going to purse bid and that there's a verbal agreement between Jermell Charlo and Tim Tszyu. That's the reports I read, but we'll see. Either way, I'm on the Jermell Charlo bandwagon from what he's done, and I always go off a track record. The track record tells me that Jermell Charlo will continue on the pathway he's been going, and that Jermell Charlo will continue on the pathway he's been going, which is why I wrote that if Jermell moves up to 160, 160 will become a much more interesting division than when it was when Jermall was on top of the middleweight division. Injury, I heard, is because they weren't selling tickets. And those are the rumors floating around. That was the rumors for the Boo Boo Andre fight as well. I don't think it was tickets. I think it was something with business. But rumors are rumors. I'm not going to throw out any rumors. My bad. I got mixed up with the brothers Jamel, not Jamal, that agreed to Tszyu. That's right. Fundora versus Munguia will be fun. And Fundora is saying he can move down to 147 to fight Errol Spence if Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford doesn't happen. I don't know how he could fit that 6'3", 6'4" frame into 147. That's a longer frame than Paul Williams. So let's see. That's a great first title defense of all belts. Jermell has a loss and a tie on his record and is still better than his brother's undefeated record. This is a great point. This is a great point right here. Get rid of the O, keeping that O, protecting the O. Get rid of it. When guys challenge themselves, Jermell is top 5, top 10 pound for pound. I think unquestionable in boxing. Jermall is not. Jermall has a 0. That second number is a 0. Jermell has 1 and 1, 2 blemishes. But guess what? Guess who the better fighter is? Guess who is universally recognized as a better fighter? Jermell. That's a perfect example. I'm glad you made this comment. It's a perfect example of the flaw in this protecting the O climate we're in. In the same household, you have a guy with 2 blemishes. You have a guy with 0. And the guy with the 2 blemishes is seen as a better, more talented, bigger name fighter in the boxing world than the guy with 0. Rest my case. Great comment. Tim may lose this one and still someday end up a title holder. I agree. That's why it's a great fight. And I was just talking about that. Like, win or lose, as long as these guys are challenging themselves, it's great for both long term. And we're at a point, it just feels like we're at a point in boxing where something's happening, right? We were stagnant in the boxing world for a while. We were all on here complaining about why isn't this guy fighting this guy? Why isn't that guy fighting that guy? We spent so much time on the business side of boxing. Now we're talking about actual fights. And it's not a coincidence that I'm back now that we're talking about actual fights, because I'd much rather talk about the fights in the business world. I'm not running a business channel. I'm not running a promoter channel, a network channel, a manager channel. I'm a boxing fan. So something's happening in boxing to where guys are mixing it up, and I love it. If the old matter, we miss out Leonard, Hearns, Duran, Hagler, Sal Sanchez, and Arguello. The 4 kings, too. On that note, man, we're going to wrap this thing up. See y'all again tomorrow. And look out for, actually, I'm going to be on the roundtable tonight on D Styles channel. And also, I'll have my thoughts on Kyoguchi tomorrow because I got a lot to say on him. Didn't fit it in today. And on Beterbiev versus Joe Smith Jr. I'll start talking about that tomorrow as well. And the documentaries are starting on the channel tonight or tomorrow morning. Lower weight class kings and 21st century classic fights.